Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Doug Gilchrist. Doug is the city manager for the City of Kelowna. Welcome to the podcast, Doug.
Thanks for having me, John. Looking forward to a conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'm really, really excited to have a chat with you. And I should just mention Kelowna, for those who may not know exactly where in the world that is in British Columbia in Canada. And so I'm yeah, excited to chat with you. First of all, tell us a little bit about you and what you do as city manager for the City of Kelowna.
So yeah, I'm a father of two, a wife of one, and I'm the city manager for a city of Kelowna. We're about 100, just under 150,000 people, halfway between Calgary and Vancouver. In fact, the biggest city between Vancouver and Calgary in Western Canada. Um, we've got an organization of a little over 1,100 people, about a $500 million a year expenditure budget, and we are the fastest growing city in Canada as of the census that was released just a few weeks ago. And it's a real
Wow.
outdoor playground. We're on a 90-mile long lake and some mountains around us, and a real outdoor playground type of environment, which a lot of people come here for. So
Yeah.
we got a great deal of retirees and lots of young people who are big on skiing, mountain biking, water skiing, and all those kinds of things.
Amazing. Yeah, that's what an incredible place, and wonderful to learn about how fast the city is growing. That's exciting. Let's hear about your story. I would love to know, as a starting point, if we think back to you growing up in your childhood, what are some of the moments or even some themes from that season of your life that have really shaped you becoming the person and the leader you are today, Doug?
Hmm. Well, I grew up in northern British Columbia. I grew up in a small town called Kitimat that had a little less than 10,000 people, an industry town. A lot of outdoor lifestyle, hunting and fishing, that kind of thing. And interestingly, a lot of people from my hometown have made it to fairly significant roles in whatever field they may have chosen. People that are head of marketing companies in the NHL. We've had very successful professional athletes. Lots of different things come out of that small town. And I don't know what it is for all of those people that drove them to success, like proportionally, quite a large number of people, I would say. Um, but for me, I think one of the things that early on kind of set the tone for me was sports. Being really heavily involved in all kinds of sports, and being challenged, and trying to keep up with kind of either my older brother or people a little bit older than me in the groups that I played on, or the teams that I played on. And sports drove a lot, I think, of my competition, my camaraderie and teamwork, and to this day, I think some of that still sticks with me a little bit in my passion to strive for something a little bit more. Part of that Type A personality definitely comes from the athletics world for me.
Mm.
Um, and of course, your parents. I think anyone is shaped by the environment they grow up in quite significantly, and my parents had a similar level of drive, both of them. And I learned a lot, and I think a big chunk of my personality is as a result of what they instilled in me when I was quite young.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's funny you mentioned sports because it's the same for me. I love sport, and I have a memory not so much from when I was really young. This was actually when I was in my 20s. But I remember playing for a soccer team, and I wasn't very fit when I first joined this team, and so I didn't make the first team. I was in the reserves, and what I remember about the preseason and being part of this team, which was really at a higher level than I had ever played before, is I just remember turning up. I remember, feeling ill after training because we were sort of pushing so hard on fitness. I remember a long drive to training, a couple of times a week, and it's so funny. But for me, I remember just pushing myself probably harder than I'd ever pushed myself before, and getting to the point with my fitness where I started actually playing really well, and then getting to the point where I felt like, I was doing really well in the reserve team. And I remember this one moment where, with all this work I'd put in, I was able to dribble past a few people and score this goal that was, for me, I just remember it so fondly because it felt like the fruit of all that work, and it felt like I'd come in and been right at the bottom of the pack, but I'd just worked week in, week out, and ended up getting selected for the first team, and then having some great moments there. But it's funny how I really learned a lesson there about, as someone said on a previous episode of the podcast, grinders win. Just that idea that if you just get
Mm.
in and turn up and work hard, and not just work hard at getting stuff done, but work hard at the people side of what you do. Work hard on becoming a better leader, work hard on these things, and you do the grind, then there's great fruit for that. So that's something that just popped into my mind as you shared that. What about for you, as you think back to the sporting days in the small town you grew up? Are there any stories? Are there any moments where Doug was on the, was playing in the middle of a game? Something that's always burned in your memory and taught you sort of a lesson that stayed sort of helpful until this day? Any memories or stories specifically from those sporting days?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few for me in the sporting world, um, and I find that it's good for debate as well. When you think of people who are born at the latter end of the year and they're bigger, stronger, faster, they will tend to do better in sport, and there's a whole theory around that and a philosophy. And I actually think it's quite the opposite. And maybe it's because of my own experience, but I was born in December. At the very end of December, I was always the youngest kid in my class. I was always one of the smallest. But as a result of that, I had to strive to work harder to not only to keep up, but if I was going to excel, I had to be that much more on my game and on top of my efforts or my training or whatever it is to be there. And I think that kind of helps shape your character. And lacrosse was my sport. I know it's not widely known worldwide, but it's got a long history, and in fact was Canada's national game for a long, long time. And for me, when I went to play in the provincials or state for some people, the state provincial level, I really wanted to play up at those rep teams and play at those teams that got to go travel. But in order to do that as a 1 year younger guy from some of them, you just had to grind it out and be there every day. So I would play in as many divisions as possible. It asked to allow them to play up a level, be the first guy on the floor, last one off, take my stick to school, and play in the backyard wherever we could. And like that sticks with me right to today in terms of work ethic. I always struggle with the conversations around work-life balance, and the people call it old school mentality when you're the first one in and the last one to leave. That's old school. That's not the way we work anymore. I don't think there is any replacement for hard work, and that is evidenced for me through my career in sports for sure. Lacrosse it was my sport. Volleyball was another one. And I gravitated to the setter position, which is kind of like the quarterback of lacrosse, right? You get to call the shots and make the plays, and get the guys who are out there pounding the ball to do the right thing. All about strategy. So I think there was different ways to use a lack of size to my advantage to help manage and run different aspects of the teams I was on, and it stuck with me for sure as a big part of who I am.
Yeah, I agree. And I've mentioned this before, one of my favorite podcast episodes. I'm a big Seinfeld fan, and Jerry Seinfeld did a chat with Tim Ferriss on the Tim Ferriss Show. And what really struck me, anyone who loves Seinfeld should check out that episode, by the way. It's so good. But Jerry Seinfeld just talked about, Tim Ferriss was sort of saying, how have you been so successful in a career that is so demanding, and like you talk about cutting edge, making people laugh and staying, so on the edge with really, great humor. And he's been able to do that. And he really did bring it back to work ethic and said, I just learned early on to write and create and just sit down. And no matter how long I had to sit there, even if I didn't write anything, I would still sit there. and try. And I would just do that daily, weekly. And this discipline meant I was always creating new ideas, and then I'd go and I'd test them. And it's funny, I feel like you expect someone like that to just have these really ethereal, oh wow, abstract ideas of why he's so good. But I love the fact that even the genius of comedy came back to hard work.
Yeah, I think he's a great personality to dig into a little bit. Uh, this notion of natural talent, the people that we think of in sport or in comedy or in business, that they're a natural talent. I think when you learn more about them or you read their biography or what have you, they're always underpinned by an incredible amount of hard work. I think there's very, very few people in the world that their natural talent is what took them to where they are. If the Richard Bransons or the Elon Musk or whomever you think of around the globe, there's a part of them that had inevitably to grind something out over the years.
Yeah, the Richard Branson autobiographies are two of my, I think there's two, sort of a part one and part two. Two of my favorite books, just because he talks about the stories, and he talks about just the grind of the early years and those moments when he sort of bet it all on an idea and it came through, but it may not have, and the last minute moments, and you realize the slog, you realize just how hard he has worked. And I think for me that is encouraging, because there's a lot I can't control about the world. There's a lot I can't control about me and what my gifts are, but I can choose to turn up and give 110%.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and talent is earned and learned, right? I mean, there's that notion of natural talent. I think is a bit overused in sport for sure, but in other areas of business as well, it's earned and learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we fast forward for you, and this might still be in I guess younger years or even in sport, but do you remember the first sort of leadership opportunity you had where there was a group of people? I mean, you've already mentioned being that role on the lacrosse team, but anything that you remember going in hindsight, well, yeah, that was really the first time I was able to really lead a group of people. I was responsible for a project or a team. The first sort of leadership opportunity or significant leadership opportunity.
Yeah, and I'd say kind of in my career, as opposed to youth or sport, I really found that project work, leadership in project work, was something I gravitated towards. Something that I could see there was an end to it, and then driving forward to that end, and doing things differently. And to this day, for sure, I think part of my success is the willingness to do things a little bit differently and break the mold. I often say to my team, challenge the status quo, and get rid of low value activities. And that came with a lot of question from people at times. They're like, well, what do you mean question the status quo? We're a great city, then we keep doing what we've been doing. No, that's not going to take us into the future. So for me, leading through initiatives kind of taught me that if we're going to get this project or this initiative over the line, we're not going to be able to do it the way we've done it in the past. We're going to have to break the mold. And going way back, I used to work for the federal government in what was then called the Department of Indian Affairs. And we had to do a long-term lease to do a major development project, 300-400 units of housing. And we came to a roadblock in this project where the developer who wanted to invest tens of millions of dollars wanted a really long-term tenure. And the only tenure that this federal agency would give is 99 years. And so I asked the question, I've never really asked this. I've worked here 3 years, but why is it 99 years? And nobody could answer the question, not the lawyers, not the people I worked with, not the people who put all the leases in place before me. And I said, well, if we do, 108 years, that'll give the developer 9 years to develop, and he'll still have a 100-year lease or a 99-year lease. And people just open their eyes. Can we do that? So, well, of course we can do that. Why not? Why can't we do it? There's no law opposing it. And then I found myself really showing the way with a whole bunch of people that were senior to me, and actually having to go to Ottawa, our nation's capital, to get a federal order in cabinet to change the protocol around how these 10 years worked. And then since then, it's been done many times. So, this is 20 years ago now. But it was a real leadership moment for me to recognize that doesn't matter where you sit in an organization or what level, you can change some pretty significant things, whether it's culturally, legislatively, or simply how business is done.
That's incredible. Were you how did you feel when you were in the room suggesting this to people who were more senior than you?
I think at the time it was kind of bold, and I could have just as easily have been shot down. But I had people around me, my manager, who actually at the time, she was one of my greatest mentors, the first woman that I actually ever worked for, and opened my eyes to her as a mentor for many years, actually, after that. Probably the best, I'll call it, boss I've ever had, in fact. The support around me at that time made all the difference. I had the latitude to do what could be done, the acknowledgement that, people at all levels can lead, things like that. And those are things I certainly haven't forgotten now that I'm leading people. Go back and remember and recognize what helped me be successful in my younger years.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I'd love to focus in on the leader you just mentioned, saying that she was probably the best leader you've ever had. Are there any other stories, because you mentioned one there, but any other stories from your time where she was leading you that come to mind, where she handled a mistake or handled a crisis, or there was just something that she said that stuck with you? Any stories from her leadership that spring to mind?
Yeah, she was a very soft-spoken leader, but you knew there was a hard edge to her if there needed to be. That you could rely on her to back you up, that she would be there in a negotiation if necessary, and that's the kind of thing. But very conversational, personal style of leadership, which for me was very different than I grew up in a kind of hard and fast. The golden rule, and the guy who has the gold makes the rules type of environment, not militaristic, but a fairly very strict environment. And this was the first time in a professional career where it was very loose, very easy environment to be comfortable and open in. And she was fantastic that way. Gave me all kinds of rope to work within, and latitude that didn't really exist in a lot of environments back then, kind of a rule-bound environment, 25 years ago. And she was my first experience in something that was less rule-bound, and she was just really, really big influence on me.
How did she do that in a rule-bound environment, manage to give you rope?
I think she, quite frankly, dismissed some of the rules, and that appealed to me because I think I take rules as guidelines. I'd say even now, that whoever wrote those rules is no smarter or no brighter than you and I, and they did their best at the time. But the rules, or even legislation for that matter, is written to try and govern as many circumstances as possible, but it's certainly not going to cover every possibility. So I take the rules with a grain of salt, and you work within them the best you can. But you've got to have and give people latitude to be creative. I mean, that's where real innovation comes from, is working outside the box.
Yeah, absolutely. So further on in your career and even up to more recently, I'm interested if there are any aha moments that really spring to mind where for some reason something is sort of burned in your memory where the penny dropped around a leadership lesson, where you sort of were part of something that has really stuck with you and taught you something about a particular style of leadership or a truth in leadership. Any aha moments that spring to mind in your career?
Um, there's my brother and I. My brother's also he's a fairly successful person in his own right in IT business, largely most of his career, and he and I kind of consider ourselves fairly regular people, I think. And I remember years ago when both of us kind of graduated into fairly senior positions, and we kind of looked at each other and then had conversation around, surely there's people better than us for these roles. We're not that smart. Half joking. Um, but I think what I learned from those conversations and then through initiatives, and I'll share one in a second, but is the idea that we are the change, right? Like we're the, whatever generation you're in, you're the person that can make that change. And you can't sit and wait around for somebody else who you think is better than you or smarter than you or in the right position. If you want to see change occur or you want to get a project or an initiative or launch a business, don't wait for somebody better than you. You're the one to do it. And the example I'll use is years ago, it's actually fairly recent here, but about 6 or 7 years ago now, we had a 50-mile or 50-kilometer rail corridor that ran right from our city through a few other cities along some beautiful topography, lake to lake to lake. And this rail corridor was coming up for disposition. The CN, Canadian National Railway, was selling it. And there's a very structured process for disposing of a railway corridor. It goes to the federal government, the provincial government, First Nation government, and then municipal government, which of course is us. And I sat in a room with a group of very senior people at the time, and nobody took a keen interest in it. They said, oh, we're not going to bid on it. The feds aren't going to bid on it. And it was just this opportunity to do something unique was just going to pass us by. And I was blown away that people couldn't see the vision for or the value and opportunity of this corridor for a rail trail, alternate modes of transportation, whatever that might be. So I stepped up and had the support of the then city manager to say, there's no way we're letting this pass us by, and created an interjurisdictional committee. We negotiated the deal. It took about a year and a half and secured tenure to something that I don't think anybody in the room thought was possible, never mind possible by a small municipality.
Wow.
And that for me was a big reminder that, there aren't necessarily better and smarter and brighter people around you. You might be it, and go after what it is you think is in front of you that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that story. Let's
Well,
let's
and
jump
today,
into
just to tell you where it's at,
yeah.
and sorry, just to tell you where that's at today, we're actually embarking right now with the local university, University of British Columbia, very well-known university, to investigate the possibility of developing that corridor into something like a fully electric autonomous vehicle corridor that links the university, our downtown, and our international airport. And that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't step back and say, how important is this, and let's take it on. So we'll see what comes of it, and hopefully something really significant after all of that effort and time.
Incredible. What a wonderful story. Well, let's jump into Leadership Express. I've got a few questions for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, first one. What is a book that you've gifted to other people?
A book. I like a lot of adventure books, but one that I've probably given to people more than anything, maybe a bit obscure one. Dan Millman is the author. It's called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and it's more of an philosophical book. He puts a story in front of you to tell a philosophical story, which was a big departure for me from my typical readings. This is probably 15 or 20 years ago. And since then, I've given to a number of people who probably also don't read that type of book very often. And it's a great one. You have to be in the right headspace or the right place to read it, floating around in a boat or something like that. But it gives you a different view of the world.
No, that's a wonderful recommendation. Thank you. I love it. What about right now? Are you in the middle of any books? Are you loving any podcasts, any blogs you're following, or anything else that you're watching, reading, listening to, and really enjoying right now?
So sadly, most of my reading is work related these days, but podcasts, yeah, when I'm running or working out. I love the Bill Maher show, Real Time with Bill Maher. I think he's hilarious, and I love the way he uses humor and politics together. He's really funny. And then Smartless with Jason Bateman and Will Arnett is another, I think, a really funny, easy to listen to group of folks who sometimes tackle some tough topics and in a good, humorous way. Keeps things light.
Yeah. Once again, love those recommendations. That's great. Do you have any favorite questions you ask, Doug, when you are in a one-on-one or you're with a team, to stakeholders? Any favorite questions you find yourself asking?
When people are challenging me in the public sector, people challenge what you do all the time. What you do, why you do it, why aren't you doing this or that or the other thing? And not to be a jerk, but I often try and put the question back to them, just to make it a more open conversation. It sometimes settles down the room a little bit if it's hot, or if it's if it's not a positive conversation that's going on, and just ask them, well, what would you do in my role? If you were the city manager, or you had this tough decision to make between X or Y, what would you do? Maybe that'll give me some better insight to where you're coming from. And it's not a negotiating tactic or trying to turn the tables, but really change the conversation sometimes if it's not going in the right direction, by asking those questions back, and then spending some time to listen. Often, I find people are looking for an avenue to vent, and you ask that type of a question with them, and it tends to decompress the room a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. I love that question. That's really good. What is a commonly held belief in leadership that you passionately disagree with?
Well, I talked about the hard work one already. Passionately held belief that I disagree with. Yeah, I think that the notion of, I won't say I disagree with this, but people often use this term too loosely. Leadership comes from everywhere. I think leadership comes from specific types of people, and you have to recognize in your organization who those people are. I think it's really critical to identify the right people to lead. And there are some who want to be led. And you have to recognize who those are as well. There are, and I think this goes for lots of different types of organizations, but there are definitely people in an organization that want to just be shown the path. They believe in you, and they want you to show them the path. And then there's others that want to step out and help you define the path. But not everybody wants to be led the same way. So the notion that everybody's a leader or everybody wants to be led, I think, is quite misleading. And the way you lead a team has to be much more thoughtful and purposeful.
Any tips on how to distinguish between the two, and who to look for to invest in as leaders within an organization?
There's a few different sort of tools that we use. to do that. We have something called a people leader meeting every year where we have the senior leadership group get together and we talk about the stars in the organization. Who's really showing glimpses of possibility or energy, who really step up, and really taking some time to talk about those people somewhat personally. Say that, this person really has this great attribute, and then having others counter that or support that, so we can identify a bit of a roster of future stars in the organization, to then invest in them, help bring them along. And I think the other one is really trying to look for people who have the right character, instead of, say, just talent or work ethic, but also character. Who are those people that are really passionate about what they do, who always put forward a good argument, who are thoughtful in their responses? When they speak, people listen to them. Really being cognizant of those people and taking note of them, not letting them sort of pass by. Because if you don't pay attention and invest in them, those are the ones that will inevitably leave. They'll be headhunted, or they'll find a better opportunity. And recognizing them, when you have somebody like that, sometimes all it takes to keep them in your organization is recognizing them, going over and saying, you know what, you're doing a hell of a job here. You have lots of potential, great possibility. Let me know if you want to step up and take on the initiative or something like that. And that recognition can go, I think, a really long way.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. It's so simple too, but so true. What is a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Something that really, I don't want to say the light bulb went on for me, because it's not brand new for me. It's something I used to say to the person who sat in my seat before me, but it's the level of influence you have as a leader. Whether we like it or not, when you sit in certain positions in an organization, people are watching, and your organization or your department or division or whatever it is, they will adapt to your management style or your philosophy. And I think if you're a strong leader, they'll adapt to your vision, but they will also potentially start to emulate the way you behave in order to appeal to you, or just because they think that's the right thing to do. Well, he's successful, so I should do it that way. So the level of influence you have as a leader is so cultural. And if you look at organizations that had a really strong leader, whether he was polarizing or not, or she was polarizing or a great leader, those organizations that have those leaders in place for a long time, they start to take on the personality or culture of that leader. And that's an impact you have to be respectful of, and that you recognize that your influence, the things you say, can shape the behavior of a lot of people in an organization, and you better be purposeful in what you do and what you say.
Yeah, absolutely. What's a great piece of advice you've received? It could be about leadership, but it could be just in life.
Well, not so much maybe in leadership, but in I'll call it management. One of the things I learned not to do as much as I had in the past was I like to systematize everything. We need a policy, or we need a practice, or we need a system. And that really takes away from people's genuine ability to get things done, or perhaps lack of innovation if you do things that way. And I really stepped back from that. I historically wanted to systematize everything that we did, from a small procurement practice to whatever it might be. And I think that can hurt an organization. You introduce bureaucracy or what have you. That was a big one for me. And then another one is recognizing the pace of people around you. We have people that move at a different pace. If you want to introduce change, or you want to move a project forward, or whatever it might be, typically the people initiating those want to move at a quicker pace than the people around them. And if you don't move at the pace of the people around you to a degree, you're going to be doing it on your own. You won't have the support of the organization around you. So just being really
Mm.
mindful of the pace people are willing to move at. And you can move, you can advance them, and you can shift or bring in the right people, but being able to take a step back and recognize the pace of the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. What is a movie or TV show that really impacted you?
A movie or TV show. Um, this is an obscure movie. I don't know if anybody will have heard of it, and uh, certainly I don't think it won any awards. But there's a movie with Jeff Bridges called The White Squall. Uh, Probably back in the '90s, I would guess. And he was the captain of a big sailing sloop, but it was he took students out, and it was part of a program, a leadership program, I think. And they learned how to sail, and they learned how to work with one another and everything like that. And it was I love boating, so that was part of the appeal to me. Um, but in the movie, after they've had all these battles amongst one another, these kids, and they've learned to be a team and that sort of thing, they hit a rogue wave, and 6 of the crew members, the kids, die, and he ends up in court over it. Later on, 6 months or a year later, and there's a big inquisition, and he's in court over it. And the kids, he's got to stand behind them. He's willing to take the fall, even though it wasn't his fault. And all of those kids that he had brought along come together as a team, and they stand up and kind of start chanting in the court and everything like that. And it's a big tearful event, and eventually they let him off the hook. But it just, the way he built those kids up and taught them, and protected them and had their back and supported them and stuff, came back to him in a similar way when he was under the gun. And it's a really cool show, and really well done.
Yeah, that's a wonderful recommendation. I haven't heard of that. I love Jeff Bridges though, so particularly love his work in the Newsroom. I don't know if you've seen that. There were only 3 seasons, but wonderful series around journalism, and he's just, oh man, he's so good in that.
Awesome.
Okay, last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say, Doug?
Um, be bold and be seen. Um, I often say to some of my team members, don't be afraid of being too far out of the box or pushing the envelope too far. The organization that you work in, or society, or whatever it is, they'll always check you up, right? They will bring you back to what's realistic or possible. So be bold and be seen. Not everybody can necessarily see the great work of people in different parts of an organization, and you have to step out a little bit and allow that to be shown, and be unapologetic about it. You don't have to be self-congratulatory. Nobody likes that level of arrogance or anything like that. But a little bit of subtle promotion, or just be seen, step up and help out, and be noticed. I think those are 2 keys to being able to move along. Careers have a horizon on them, and the opportunities come by not that often. You got to take advantage of them. So be bold and be seen. That would be my advice.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I love that advice. That's really good. So for people who've loved today and want to find out more about Kelowna, maybe join those numbers in terms of the people flocking to Kelowna, but also people who might want to connect with you online, say on LinkedIn. Any thoughts for how people can find out more about you and the city, Doug?
You mean other than exclusively on the John O. White podcast show from Australia? Yes, certainly the City of Kelowna. We have our fair share of Australians and lots of people coming from around the globe. We've kind of been discovered, it seems, with the pace of growth that we have. So, yeah, look us up on City of Kelowna, and certainly me on LinkedIn. You can just find me at Doug Gilchrist, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me or connect with me.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. This has been a really fun episode. I have appreciated the stories Doug's told, and just some great wisdom around leadership. It's been a really rich episode, actually. I've really loved it. So for our listeners, don't forget, I also have the John O. White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, two other places you can go to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to you, Doug, for being so generous with your time, for sharing wonderful stories, starting, with the story of you on the lacrosse team. And I just love hearing those stories all the way back growing up that have really shaped people like you to do incredible things now that you're doing in the City of Kelowna. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Jono, and good luck. Really appreciate having the opportunity. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, John O. White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O. White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.